For 40 years, the Museveni dynasty believed they were carved from the granite of immortality. They believed they could rule by the iron scent of the gun, silence the cries of the opposition with the shadow of the dungeon, and tweet threats to the global stage without a single ripple of consequence. They were wrong. Today, the granite is fracturing. Washington is no longer whispering warnings in the corridors of diplomacy. It is sharpening a warrant that could sever the lineage of power forever. We are receiving explosive reports that the United States Senate is pushing for the nuclear option against the heir apparent General Muhoozi Kainerugaba. The era of polite velvet glove talk is dead. Following the state-sanctioned violation of Bobi Wine's sanctuary and the harrowing tear-stained testimony of his wife Barbie, a red line has been crossed that cannot be uncrossed. This is not a drill. This is a diplomatic earthquake whose tremors are felt from the marble halls of the capital to the red soil of Ouagadougou. The files are open. The sanctions are drafted. For the first time in history, the son of a sitting president faces the cold reality of international arrest. The hunter has finally become the hunted. Do not look away. What happens in the next few minutes will decide the fate of a nation and the dignity of a continent. If this story resonates with your sense of justice, stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is a hinge in history. Show your support with a like, a comment, or a subscription. It means more than numbers. It keeps the flame of truth alive against the winds of propaganda. To grasp the sheer magnitude of this moment, we must look beyond the ink on the warrants. This is not merely a legal dispute. It is the collision of two different Africas. On one side, we have the old guard represented by the Uganda crisis, where power is treated as a family heirloom to be passed from father to son like a blood-stained baton. On the other side, a new voice has emerged from the Sahel, a voice that has turned this local tragedy into a global reckoning for sovereignty. Ibrahim Traoré has entered the fray not as a spectator but as a catalyst, as the news of the impending arrest of Muhoozi Kainerugaba hit the airwaves. Traoré did not join the chorus of Western cheers. Instead, he delivered a speech that sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community, a speech that stripped bare the very foundations of how the West deals with African leaders. Traoré's intervention has changed the chemistry of the situation. While the U.S. Senate moves to trigger the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, a surgical strike designed to freeze the financial jugular of the Museveni regime, Traoré has raised a question that haunts the conscience of the world. Why now? Why did the world watch in silence for 4 decades as the drones, those windowless vans of terror, snatched the youth of Kampala from the streets? Why did the strategic patience of the West only expire when the dynasty began to wobble? The activation of the Magnitsky Act is the modern sword of justice, capable of hunting down the architects of repression and locking them out of the global financial system. It targets individuals, not nations. It freezes assets in London, New York, and Frankfurt. It slams the door on the territories of the free world. For General Muhoozi, the man who mocks the world on social media, the world is suddenly becoming very small. The tweeting general is finding that the internet is a vast place, but a jail cell is not. Yet as the legal machinery of the West begins to grind, Ibrahim Traoré's voice reminds us that true justice cannot be a gift from Washington. It must be a harvest from the soil of Africa. The timing of this legal storm is calculated, with the looming 2026 election. Intelligence reports suggest a premeditated plan to militarize the ballot box. The U.S. is signaling that the path to succession cannot be paved with the blood of the innocent. But Traoré's shocking speech suggests something deeper, that this is not just about one man's arrest, but about the end of a system where African lives are used as pawns in a geopolitical game of chess. The tension is no longer just between a dictator and his people, it is between a dying era of puppet masters and a rising sun of authentic leadership. But to understand the fury behind Traoré's words and the urgency of the Senate's warrant, we must leave the abstract world of policy and descend into the terrifying reality of a single night in Uganda. We must look at the physical cost of the impunity that the Museveni family thought they bought, because before the lawyers in Washington spoke, the soldiers in Kampala struck, and what they did inside the home of a mother would become the spark that lit this global wildfire. To truly understand why the international community has reached its breaking point, we must stand in the red dust of Magere at the gates of a home that became a battlefield. The assault on the household of Bobi Wine was not a standard security operation, it was a calculated desecration of dignity. When state security forces, according to the harrowing testimony of Barbie Kyagulanyi, stormed the compound, they did not bring warrants or the rule of law. They brought the stench of alcohol and the raw, unfiltered violence of a mob in uniform. This was a home invasion masquerading as law enforcement, where the sanctuary of a family was shattered by the splintering of wood and the smashing of glass. Imagine the psychological terror of a mother cornered in her own living room by armed drunken men who answered to no authority but their own. Let us take a moment here not to rush forward but to give thanks. Write a comment with the simple thank you to the spirit of sovereignty or to the courage of those who stand firm against oppression. Gratitude is not a formality. It is recognition. It is dignity expressed in words. When you add your voice of thanks, you are standing in solidarity with the story of freedom and pride. Take this pause to comment your thank you. Together, those words become a beacon that shines far beyond the screen. The fallout of this brutality has created a political vacuum that the Museveni dynasty never anticipated. For 40 years, the president had been viewed as a stabilizing elder statesman in East Africa, a partner in the global war on terror. But that mask of legitimacy has slipped, revealing the jagged edges of a military junta determined to install a hereditary monarchy. The Uganda crisis is no longer a domestic dispute over a ballot box, it is a systemic collapse. The Muhuzi Project, the transparent attempt to gift a nation of 50 million people to a son as if they were livestock in a will, has backfired. By targeting the family of the opposition, the regime did not just create victims, they created a magnifying glass that focused the world's fury directly onto their own ugliness. The consequences are now manifesting as a financial and diplomatic strangulation. The United States Senate's move to trigger the Magnitsky Act is a surgical strike against the regime's bank accounts. It targets the architects of the drones, those windowless Toyota vans that have become the ghost shuttles of the Kampala gulags. These vehicles roam the streets, snatching critics into a world of safe houses and dungeons where the law does not exist. Under the command of General Muhuzi, the military has mutated into a personal enforcement squad. But a dictator cannot rule by the gun alone, he needs the lubrication of international currency. When the U.S. banking system slams its doors, when visas are revoked, and when the threat of an Interpol red notice looms, the world of the tweeting general begins to shrink. He becomes a prisoner in his own palace, unable to travel to the very capitals where global power resides. This is the point where the narrative shifts from the streets of Kampala to the soul of the continent. Ibrahim Traoré watched these events unfold with a gaze that pierces through the veil of diplomatic theater. He saw the hypocrisy of a Western system that funds a regime with one hand and drafts arrest warrants with the other. Traoré's shocking speech was a clarion call against this cycle of dependency. He reminded us that the billions of dollars poured into Uganda taxpayer money intended for schools and medicine have been weaponized. When the tear gas canisters are fired into peaceful crowds, whose fuel are they burning? When the drones patrol the night, who paid for the shipment? Traoré's intervention stripped away the comfort of the strategic patience policy, forcing a realization that stability bought at the price of mass repression is a house built on sand. The benefits of the old regime are evaporating, replaced by a terrifying paradox for the elite. The senior commanders in the Ugandan military now face a choice that will define their lives. Do they remain loyal to a fading dynasty and face international pariah status? Or do they protect the institution of the army? The impunity card that protected them for 4 decades has expired. The symbols of their power, the tanks, the tweets, the uniforms, are becoming liabilities in a world that is finally listening to the cries of the mothers they terrorized. The era of invisible crimes is over, and the ledger of history is being balanced in real time. Yet as the financial walls close in and the arrest warrants are prepared, the regime is not retreating. Like a wounded beast, it is preparing to strike with a ferocity never seen before. The 2026 election looms like a storm on the horizon, and intelligence suggests that the dynasty is ready to turn the entire nation into a fortress to ensure the coronation of the sun. But as the general prepares his final move, a new force is rising from the shadows, a force that even the most advanced Western sanctions cannot control. The pivot of this story occurred not in a courtroom in Washington, but in the heart of a thunderous silence that followed the Senate's demand for arrest. As the international community braced for the usual diplomatic back and forth, Ibrahim Traoré stepped to the podium. His presence alone was a defiance of the old order. While others spoke of legalities, Traoré spoke of the soul. He did not come to defend a tyrant, nor did he come to applaud the West. He came to dismantle the very architecture of the Uganda crisis. He looked directly into the camera and asked a question that shattered the narrative. How can those who provided the whip now claim to be the saviors of the one being lashed? This was the shocking speech that redirected the global gaze. Traoré highlighted the bitter irony of a superpower that sustained the Museveni regime with billions in military aid for decades, only to suddenly discover the concept of human rights when the dynasty's expiration date became inconvenient. This is the moment where we must recognize that you are part of something bigger than a channel. You are part of a community that refuses to let these narratives be written by outsiders. If you want to join that community more deeply, if you want to support the team bringing these stories to life, become a member. Your contribution directly funds better research, deeper investigations, and clearer truth. You are not just supporting Traoré Unfiltered, you are supporting every leader, every nation, and every voice fighting for independence and dignity. Join us and stand with the principle that the story of Africa belongs to Africa. The reaction to Traoré's stance was an explosion of polarized energy. In Kampala, the regime attempted to spin the arrest warrants as a badge of honor, a sign of standing up to imperialists. But the people knew better. They saw the contrast. On one side was a young leader like Traoré who had traded the comforts of the elite for the fatigues of the common soldier, advocating for true sovereignty. On the other was General Muhoozi, the tweeting General Z, whose only claim to power was a DNA strand and a command structure built on fear. The pressure began to mount within the Ugandan military's own ranks. Young officers who see the rising tide of Pan-Africanism across the continent are starting to ask if their oath of allegiance is to a nation or to a single family's bank account. The choice facing the Museveni dynasty is now a binary one: reform or ruin. The global Magnitsky sanctions are not just a slap on the wrist, they are a financial exile. When your assets are frozen, your capacity to pay the very men who protect you vanishes. Loyalty in a dictatorship is often a commodity, and the price of that commodity is skyrocketing. For the first time, the Muhoozi project looks less like a coronation and more like a funeral procession for a political era. Traoré's intervention served as a mirror reflecting the ugly truth that a leader who cannot travel to the world's capitals, who cannot use the global banking system, and who is hunted by international law is no longer a leader, he is a liability. The pressure from Washington is real, but the pressure from the streets of Africa is what keeps the regime awake at night. The digital age has ensured that the cries from the dungeons of Kampala reach the ears of the youth in Ouagadougou, Nairobi, and Lagos. The drone vans may snatch bodies, but they cannot snatch the ideas that Traoré has ignited. The opposition in Uganda, led by those who have felt the weight of the boot, are no longer looking to the West for a miracle. They are looking to the model of the Sahel, a model where dignity is taken, not requested. But as this shift in power begins to tilt the scales, a new and darker development is emerging from within the palace walls. The regime, feeling the news of the sanctions tighten, and hearing the echo of Traoré's words, has begun to activate a scorched earth contingency. They are not planning to leave quietly. We have received reports of a clandestine meeting where the decision was made to bypass the 2026 ballot box entirely in favor of a more permanent, more violent solution. The world is watching the arrest warrant, but they are missing the shadow moving behind the curtain. A shadow that intends to turn the entire region into a theater of chaos before the first handcuff can ever be clicked. To understand the true nature of this confrontation, we must look beneath the medals and the military fatigues of the man at the center of the storm. General Muhoozi Kainerugaba is a character study in the intoxication of inherited power. For years, he has moved through the world with the untouchable swagger of a prince who believes the laws of gravity do not apply to him. His tweets, often erratic, sometimes threatening, and always unfiltered, are not just social media posts. They are the psyche of a regime that has forgotten the difference between a country and a kitchen garden. He mocks the West while using their technology. He threatens his neighbors while relying on their trade routes. But behind the digital bravado lies a hollow core. The motivation is not public service, but a desperate need to validate a birthright that the people never signed for. This is the Muhuzi project in its rawest form, a frantic attempt to prove that a crown of bayonets can stay on a head that hasn't earned it. But the system he commands is far more dangerous than his tweets. It is a machinery of survival designed to turn every citizen into a potential suspect. The drones that haunt the streets of Kampala are the physical manifestation of a regime that has run out of arguments. When a government can no longer convince, it must kidnap. When it can no longer inspire, it must intimidate. The price of this system is paid in the broken dreams of a generation of Ugandans who see their future being hoarded by a single family. This is the systemic disease that Ibrahim Traoré addressed in his shocking speech. Traoré didn't just talk about politics, he talked about the calloused hands of the worker versus the manicured hands of the dynast. He exposed the system as a predatory entity that consumes its own children to stay fed. Take a second right here to tell us where you're watching from. Write in the comments the name of your city, your country, or the land beneath your feet. Traoré Unfiltered reads every one of them with immense gratitude, and we send to each of you a heartfelt wish. May your journey be filled with dignity, hope, and light. This is more than a video. It is a gathering of voices across the globe united by a shared thirst for truth. The price to be paid for this impunity is finally coming due, but it is not just the general who will pay it. In the high-stakes game of international diplomacy, there are no clean breaks. The proposed arrest warrant and the Magnitsky sanctions create a ripple effect that shatters the comfort of the entire Ugandan elite. Imagine being a high-ranking official who has spent decades accumulating wealth only to find that your bank cards are useless in London, your children are being deported from universities in New England, and your name is on a list that makes you a pariah in every corner of the free world. This is the psychological warfare of the global Magnitsky Act. It turns the palace into a prison. It makes the strong man look very small when he cannot even secure a visa for a medical checkup. However, we must remain grounded in the reality of the Uganda crisis. For every legal victory in a Senate office, there is a counter-move in the safe houses of Kampala. The regime knows that an arrest warrant for the son is a death warrant for the father's legacy. They are digging in. The system is being purged of anyone who shows a flicker of hesitation. The price of loyalty has shifted from rewards to survival. If you're not with the dynasty, you are an enemy of the state. This is the scorched earth phase of autocracy where the leadership decides that if they cannot own the nation, they will leave it in ruins. Ibrahim Traoré understands this better than anyone. His speech was a warning to the youth of Africa: do not wait for the warrant to be signed in Washington to claim your freedom. The warrant that matters is the one written in the hearts of the people. Traoré's rise represents the nightmare of every hereditary ruler, the moment when the soldier realizes his gun belongs to the nation, not the general. As the U.S. Senate pushes for the arrest of Muhuzi, they are inadvertently validating what Traoré has been saying all along, that the old guard is a sinking ship and those who stay on board will go down with it. The tension has now reached a fever pitch. Reports are surfacing of frantic movement within the Presidential Guard Brigade. Whispers of a Plan B are circulating, a plan that involves a total shutdown of the internet, a state of emergency, and the suspension of the Constitution to bypass the 2026 election entirely. The general is no longer tweeting jokes. He is moving chess pieces that involve real steel and real lives. But as the regime prepares to lock the gates, they have forgotten one thing. You can lock a gate, but you cannot lock out the wind. And the wind of change, fueled by the words of Traoré and the pressure of the world, is already inside the walls. The terminal phase of this struggle is no longer about a single arrest warrant or a set of frozen bank accounts. It is about the inevitable collision between a dying past and an unstoppable future. The Uganda crisis has reached a point of no return where the crown of bayonets is beginning to pierce the very head that wears it. For decades, the Museveni dynasty operated on the assumption that the world's attention was a flickering candle easily extinguished by the winds of new headlines. They believed the silence of the graveyard they imposed on Kampala would be mistaken for peace. But the courage of Barbie Kyagulanyi and the thousands of nameless youths who have vanished into the windowless drones have turned that silence into a roar that even the marble walls of the US Senate cannot ignore. We are witnessing the final desperate gasps of a system that views compassion as weakness and violence as the only currency of statecraft. There is a profound sense of righteous fury that a nation with such immense potential, such vibrant youth, and such rich soil has been treated as a private estate for 40 years. It is a tragedy of history that the very leaders who once promised liberation have become the architects of a new hereditary bondage. We look at the streets of Kampala today and feel a deep regret for the stolen years, the suppressed votes, and the brilliance of a generation that was forced to choose between exile or the dungeon. The Muhuzi project was never a plan for the nation, it was a plan for a palace. But as the shadows lengthen over the old guard, a new light is breaking from the Sahel. Ibrahim Traoré did not just deliver a speech, he delivered a verdict. He reminded the world that while Washington's warrants are written in ink, the destiny of Africa is written in the sweat and resolve of its people. Traoré's voice has become the bridge between the anger of the oppressed and the hope of the sovereign. He has shown that the era of the big man is a relic, and the era of the citizen is struggling to be born. The pressure from the West may squeeze the regime's pockets, but it is the awakening of the African spirit, the realization that dignity cannot be imported, that will finally break the chains. As we prepare to end, remember this is not the end of the road, but a seed planted in the soil of your heart. Every story of dignity, every voice of sovereignty is part of a harvest that lies ahead. If you want to see that harvest grow, subscribe to this channel. Not because we ask for numbers, but because we are building a space where voices of independence are honored and where stories of pride continue to be told. By subscribing, you are not just supporting us, you are choosing to walk with us into the next chapter of Africa's unfolding story. Let this channel be the road we walk together, the light we carry forward. Your subscription is not for us alone, it is for the promise of what is still to come. Join us and be ready for the next chapter that is already waiting to be written. The story that began with a smashed door in Magere is ending with the opening of 1,000 doors across the continent. History is waiting for a signature, but that signature will not come from a bureaucrat in a distant capital. It will come from the collective hand of a people who have decided that they are no longer subjects but masters of their own fate. The tweeting general may find himself a prisoner of his own making, but the youth of Uganda are finding their wings. The arc of the moral universe is long, and though it has been bent by the weight of tyranny for 40 years, it is finally snapping back toward justice. Ibrahim Traoré stands as a testament that the status quo is not a life sentence. His leadership reminds us that the Uganda crisis is but a dark chapter in a much larger book of African Renaissance. As the sun sets on the Museveni era, we do not look back with bitterness but forward with a fierce, unyielding hope. The revolution is not just televised, it is being lived in every heart that refuses to bow. Ibrahim Traoré has lit the torch and the fire is spreading. Stand tall, stay vigilant, and remember the dawn does not ask permission from the night to break.